soil is just dirt. They said we couldn't do it. They said we were mad. And yes, maybe we are. That's right, folks. We made it to 200. I'm Rob, that's Liam. And this week, for the Hey You Guys podcast, episode 200, we watched Robot Jox. A film we were both convinced nobody else has heard of, let alone ever seen. But yes, we did it. Directed by Stuart Gordon, the visionary, in quotations, that gave us Reanimator, The Pit and the Pendulum, Fortress, Castle Freak, and Space Truckers. Now, this guy did write Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but they're his directorials.
Reanimate is awesome, dude.
Yeah. Join us as we delve into 50 years after a nuclear holocaust where mankind has been decimated and the surviving nations have formed two superpowers, the very American market and the Soviet-influenced Confederation. Traditional war has been outlawed. So how do we settle disputes? I hear nobody ask. Well, I'll tell you. The only logical way, of course, you get two men to fight over what it is these superpowers want to control. And no, not in single combat. Oh, no. We will take all our remaining resources, which we have very little of, and create giant robots to fight one-on-one in a field full of spectators. I mean, nothing can go wrong with that plan, can it? Can it? Oh, but of course it does go wrong, and our hero quits being a robot Jox. No more crash and burn in his future. Well, I'm guessing like 7.5 hours before he comes back into the fray to save the woman he loves, the woman he's spoken to like twice before, from being his replacement. Because God forbid a woman can be a robot Jox. Now, the story is laughable at best. The acting is more clunky than the actual robots fighting. But as kids, Liam and I have both admitted to loving it. But what about now? Where does Robot Jox stand in the pantheon of films we grew up loving? I, for one, am left a little disheartened at this film for reasons we will go into. But for now, Liam, I have to ask, and yes, jumping straight to the final battle, did Alexander unleash a Dixor?
Yes, Alexander did unleash a Dixor, and yes, I did forget that happened. If you had any doubts as to just how homoerotic the relationship was between Alexander and Achilles, and it was already pretty clear that that relationship was pretty homoerotic, they were like, no, we're really going to, like, no pun intended, drill this home with a Dixor.
Yeah. It was so what a large one as well.
It's so gay. It's almost unbelievably gay that I was just, I can't believe I the thing is, I watched this when I was a kid. I was probably like, oh, cool, a Dixor. Or, when I think of dick-based weapons, I think of
Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah, Dusk Till Dawn. What's the character's name? Mean Machine?
Sexy Beast.
Sex Machine, wasn't it?
Sex Machine, not Sexy Beast.
Machine. We got it between us. It's fine. That's why we do this podcast together. I'm just on our own. The thing is with that, it just pops up, it's dick and balls, and it just looks cool. And you have no doubt as to, Sex Machine is just all about the ladies. In this, the whole film is kind of building this homoerotic relationship between Achilles and Alexander. And then right at the end, they're just like, I'm not sure if anyone gets it. We haven't really had enough time to build that relationship. I know what we'll do, Dixor. But that's one of the problems with this film is that it doesn't quite decide. There are problems with this film. Make no mistake. I still enjoy this film. It's rubbish, but I knew that when I was a kid. I didn't watch this film when I was younger and think this is like up there with, the B-movie genre likes of like Predator, Aliens, all those films. I wanted to love it because it had big robots in it. But even watching this as a kid, it like the stop motion stuff already looked a little bit dated. It does now, albeit with a chintzy charm. And yeah, it's still rubbish now, but there is something about it. There's a reason it's hung around and it's become something of a cult classic. And why it's influenced so many other films, it's because there is a great film in there. Sadly, it doesn't exist on the screen. There was just like, what was if we made like Transformers before the technology was there? You get RoboJox. What was if we make like giant robots fighting before the technology is there? It's like, well, we get RoboJox instead of Pacific Rim, for instance. But you can see the influence that this has had on Pacific Rim. So, right down to the one scene where Achilles, when he has his first fight and he's in the robot and he's doing his testing and he punches his own hand. That is directly referenced in Pacific Rim. Like, there's no subtlety there. It's not just, that's another giant robot film. Guillermo del Toro has watched this film and thought, this is awesome. I think there should be giant monsters.
I think I can make it better,
Yeah. And he does, in fairness.
So, I always thought it was RoboJox. You've called it RoboJox. It's Robot Jox, yeah.
No, Robot Jox. I don't call it Yeah, it's
You called it Robojocks.
No, I don't. Well, if I did, it was by accident. It's Robot Jocks for sure.
Okay, thank you. I knew it was Robojocks when I was a kid, but yeah, but Robot
Oh
Jocks.
no, I always knew it was Robot Jocks.
As much as I want to say, I wish I remembered there being a Dixo. I don't. I don't remember a lot of this film. And for episode 200, I am pulling out a classic. Chekhov's tank treads. You saw it the first time you see the robot. Like you like as soon as you see Achilles' robot, tank treads on the back of his thigh, and you think, okay, yeah, well, why does he need them? And then obviously, and oh my god, that thing looked it looked like the robot was trying to take a shit as it's
going around. I mean, it's hard not to jump directly to the end, but I mean, again, I forgot that the robots went to space simply because they've seen other things, whether it be video games or, because obviously its influences are myriad to somewhat. There's obviously influences from Japanese animation, from video games, from movies, from Transformers, blah, 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 all these things. But at some point, it was just like, wouldn't it be awesome if they went to space? But I'm not sure if it was a budget or a special effects constraint, but they kind of go to space and you're like, wait, why did they go to space? Nothing happened. They just go to space. They come back down. He hurts his leg. Then he goes into Robot Jock's wheelchair mode, which should be awesome. And again, it's just like, oh, we want to do like a Transformers moment. It's not really very cool. Like on paper, you can imagine that last battle on like a storyboard looking amazing. And then in reality, this was filmed in 1987, I think, which goes a long way to answering some of the questions you have around this film, because it was released in 1990, and the fact that nobody gave a shit about the Cold War, for instance, meant that it invariably flopped. But yeah, the technology simply wasn't there to realize whatever was going on in the director's head, and you end up with these really clunky battle moments, which is like still kind of oddly iconic, but clunky all the same.
Not just clunky, like clunky everything. When Achilles is doing his, I'm going to fight all of these, as they called him in the film, test tube babies.
Tubies, yeah.
Tubies. That's clunky. Like everything. The acting was clunky in this. Again, Tex, my God, they could have found a better actor for Tex. Jesus Christ.
Dude, don't go after what I think you reminded me of JR from WWE. Michael
Aldridge.
The biggest problem with him was this, like, they made it so obvious that he was the spy about 10 minutes into the film. Like Athena, like lays it down like straight away. She's like, oh, why didn't you do this? How did you manage to do that? And like, it's not subtle. He just starts sweating loads and he's just like, I was like, was this a double bluff? And I was like, no, he kills himself. He's definitely the bad guy. And I was just like, they could have kept that as a fucking, a big kind of plot twist or something, because he has his showdown. Is again very clumsy showdown with Matsumoto.
Yeah, they do it for the big reveal with the video, and he takes it so well. He's like, "Well, fuck me, he recorded me. I'm gonna jump down his elevator shaft now."
And in fairness, he goes out like a champ. I mean, not many people jump to their death shouting Geronimo.
I was about to say he yeehaw. Speaking of deaths, and I'm gonna bring it up straight away, right? A lot of times, as we're getting older now, when we watch these films, some of the characters, some of the actors are dead.
Oh, such a bummer.
Oh, mate, this film, right, makes me really, really sad. It was only released in 1989. You said filmed in 1987. Gary Graham played Achilles, dead. Paul Koslow played Alexander, dead. Robert Sampson played Commissioner Jameson, dead. Hilary Mason played Professor, and this is a UK version. What was it? Hyacinth Bouquet or Bucket.
Yeah.
Played Professor Laplace, but is Laplace, let's be fair, dead. Michael Aldridge, Tex, dead. The director, Stuart Gordon, dead.
Well, I mean, I don't know how you talk your way out of that cul-de-sac. So everyone's dead in this film, and everything's a bummer. We're all getting old.
Everyone's
Death
dead,
comes
Dave.
to us all. Fantastic. And I feel like I want to say something nice about the film after that. And I mean, I still love the aesthetic, even though the effects can't live up, and the scale of the production can't live up to the ideas in the director's head. But I mean, I still think some of the biggest issues is that.
So sorry, dude. I'll let you go on. Matsumoto, dead. I forgot him.
Oh, yeah. No, thanks. Yeah. So, I was trying to steer, get us back on the road, but no, keep naming dead people. That's fantastic. My big issue is that there are some really big ideas in this movie, but they're all horrendously underbaked. Like, there is a hint of satire here. There's a hint of RoboCop. There's a hint of Gattaca in this. All underplayed, all underbaked. There's also like stuff on obviously there's the Cold War stuff. It's not very subtle. You got to remember this was made in 1987 when that was still a thing. They're basically trying to do Rocky 4 but with giant robots. But by 1990 when this was released, or 89 in the States, I think nobody really gave a shit. There's like they kind of tiptoe around the warring nature of man, the dangers of technology, the whole nature versus nurture thing with the Tubies. There's some really big ideas here, and they all go completely like by the wayside. Like none of it's that way, and part of it is because this movie's like 85 minutes long. Now, one part of me is like, oh, dude, I want them to like dig deeper into these things, but the other part of me is like, I think the only reason I really enjoy this film is because it's 85 minutes and it doesn't outstay its welcome. That's the only reason, and it's like the writer and the director clash constantly on the tone of this movie, and you can feel it all the way through. So. Director Stuart Gordon wanted like Transformers, whereas the screenwriter Joe, I think his name is Joe Haldeman, he wanted to deliver a story about soldiers, like something more grounded. And the way they described it was that the director wanted a movie for kids that adults can enjoy, whereas the writer wanted a movie for adults, which kids can enjoy. And what they've ended up doing is kind of splitting the difference. And it doesn't feel like I remember enjoying this as a kid for sure. But when you go back and rewatch it now, it's neither of those things, and it kind of fits in like a no man's land. So you have these ideas which have obviously been pushed in by the screenwriter, but then the director's like, no, I want this to be Transformers the movie. So it all just kind of sits there in the background, not doing anything at all. And the same with character development. As you said, like Achilles falling in love with Athena after he talks to her twice, it just comes out of fucking nowhere. And you're just like, do you buy their relationship? Absolutely fucking not. It's just one of those films.
The other thing that comes out of nowhere, and it's only said in one line, I think, and then a couple of posters, was this whole thing about, I guess they're trying to repopulate a nuclear holocaust destroyed Earth.
Yeah.
Because he walks past a bunch of, in his fucking car, mate, but like that's polluting everywhere. But he walks past a bunch of posters that showing women being pregnant. And I'm like, what's with these pregnancy posters? Then he goes upstairs, goes into the house where all the kids are with his
brother and his wife.
And his brother is in that, like, I don't know, man in a bubble room, apparently, because his job is to be a reader. Okay, that's fine. Whatever that is.
Make no mistake, but you know it's the future because he's wearing lab goggles, like, casually. Like, that's the kind of, this is the future. Oh, look, he's wearing lab goggles, but just as normal glasses. Fantastic.
Then the line says, we get 2 bedrooms because we've got 6 kids. So that's a good thing. They've got 6 kids, so they're getting more rooms. Like, 2 bedrooms.
Yeah. Well, it's very strange. Like, you know, I mentioned there, like you got underdeveloped themes, underdeveloped characters, but even like the scale of the dystopia in this film is only hinted at and is never properly addressed. You know, the only reason you know it's a bummer is because the stew only has 1 sausage. That is literally the only giveaway as to the level of dystopia
we've got real meat. And when you saw that thing, I mean, there's your homosexual look again, right? It's just this big fucking giant phallus. It was so fucking funny. The other thing, right, as well, was were they in Mega City 1? Was that basically where they were? Because it wasn't
that's the vibe they're going for.
Yeah, because it wasn't like, what did I call them as well? You had the market and then who were the other guys? I did have it in mind. The Confederation.
Yeah.
So they're fighting over, like, at this point, Alaska.
Which is awfully low key. Like, they couldn't have gone for, like, I don't know, New York or Washington. It's like, no, we're going to fight over Alaska. I get it, natural reserves and stuff, but it doesn't kind of instill the film with the greatest sense of threat. It's like, we'll be okay if we lose Alaska. You know, there's not much there. I'll be fine.
Yeah, but the Confederation and the market are in the same complex. From where I can go. Well, they go to the same bar to fucking drink and fight. Like, there was just 2 sets in this entire film.
Yeah, and one of them is one of cinema's worst ever bars. It's the worst bar. It's such a bad bar. And again, like you say, they all just show up and they can just like buddy around. Like, you got to like realize that these guys, like you say, are having basically proxy wars on behalf of their nation. So it's just like, oh, you know, the one that springs to mind, I actually think it's not a terrible idea. It would certainly kind of, you know, reduce the amount of death going on. If what was it, the start of Troy, a film which I actually think is okay, the Brad Pitt one. So at the start, you've got the 2 armies, and they decide, oh, we're gonna have our 2 greatest warriors fight it out on our behalf. So it's just like 1-on-1, and whoever wins, the rest, like, we keep the land, you guys have to fuck off. And they actually have that really awesome like 1-hit kill at the start of the film. I kind of like that idea, but you would think there would be so much pressure on them. Like, you are fighting for your nation. You're like, this one fight determines where Alaska goes, who owns Alaska. And yet they just stroll in, they're sharing bars. There is apparently zero fucking security. You think it'd be like the biggest deal in the world. It's like, dude, this robot is fighting for our future. A woman, just because she's wearing a mask, just strolls in. Nobody seems to ask any questions. Like, is this definitely Achilles? Is acting pretty weird. No security here. In she fucking goes. Out she pops. And even when she does, the referees, who are the strangest part of this film, I might add, they just like, sorry, fight's still going to go on. Like, who is putting these referees in place? Like, their role is actually super important to the outcome of mankind, dare I say, because they are making sure they're establishing the rules by which the Confederation and basically the USA have to. Sorry.
I'm agreeing with you. They're just referees, but apparently they're not. They're like the superpower of superpowers. Yeah. They're the guys that decide everything that goes on.
And yet they're all dressed like they work at Foot Locker. What the fuck is going on?
They look like the guys, and I know it's filmed after, the random referee in that Hugh Jackman film, Real Steel, that comes in to count.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing where you got to wear a fucking helmet and things like that.
Well, it's basically just a WWE ref with a fucking like a taekwondo hat on. That's all it is.
Do you know what? It looked like the fucking what was that? What was that TV show from the 80s where you had the motorbike, the really good motorbike? Oh, fucking Jesus Christ! Was it was like Knight Rider but on a bike.
Oh, I know the one. Sorry, yeah. I can think of. I can think of Knight Rider. I can think of Air Fox. So I can think of all the one in the car, the one with the helicopter, and the
Fox, Air Wolf.
What did I say?
It was Air Wolf, not Air Fox.
Did I say Air Fox?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I meant that's bizarre because I definitely know Air Wolf. I had the helicopter, the die-cast helicopter.
Street Hawk.
It
looked like he had the helmet from Street Hawk. Oh, actually, now you say it, mind the Air Fox one. Mm-hmm. It looked like the helmet they were when they're flying Air Fox around.
Fox, fantastic.
But I don't even know what the fuck my point was now.
Well, it's just strange that these referees seem to have so much weight. Like after they have this big battle, it just comes down to like a group of poorly dressed referees who are basically going to dictate what happens. And then when he comes out, you think they're saying it's like, dude, that's not our pilot. Surely they'd be like, this is a pretty big deal. We'll call it for now. Get your pilot in. Get yourself. Even give them a timeline. Say, listen, you got an hour to sort your shit out. Instead, they're just like, no. Your combatant is out on the field. Anything goes at this point. You got Alexander killing everyone. I mean, Alexander should go to jail, if only for his Russian accent. And sir, I'm not gonna lie, I will never forgive you not for taking a punt with the opening quote.
I didn't, but I tell you what I did before you go for the opening. I literally, one of my notes says, Paul Kaslow as Alexander sounds like you, Liam, trying to do a Russian accent.
If I that's exactly what it is. Yeah. In some of the lines he has, 1 week you mine, I kill you dead. It's like, what the fuck does that even mean? Even in the bad Russian accent. Then the best line of his is, you make my drink taste like blood. What the fuck? What film is this? Where do you get these quotes? I mean, the thing is, nobody will talk about his Russian accent and just how bad he is. And he is German-Canadian, so he's not Russian. Because this film wasn't that popular. And I think when people think of the worst Russian accents of all time, I mean, the gold standard remains John Malkovich in Rounders. It's fucking phenomenal. If you've not seen Rounders, it's worth watching just for John Malkovich. Just taking... some people call it a big swing.
I can't even do Russian. But when
it's just a terrible accent.
He fuck me with that part, and you go, he fuck me good. Like, I'm not even trying the Russian accent. I can't do it. So
there's John Malkovich in Rounders. Schwarzenegger in Red Heat is a notoriously bad one. A film I haven't seen, again, bringing in, it sounds like another TV show from the 80s. Clint Eastwood in Firefox from 1982.
Oh, yes.
I've never actually seen that film, but it's one of those ones I always remember the poster. I really need to get around to watching Firefox, if only now to hear how bad his Russian accent is. And the other one is Ford and Neeson in K-19, The Widowmaker. Although going back and rewatching that, and I did go back and watch a clip of it, it's not so much bad as it is lazy. You can just feel the actors just going, if I just keep toning this down, eventually I'm just going to stop talking with the Russian accent. It made me think of, remember Richard Attenborough in Jurassic Park?
Yeah.
Like at the start of the film, you're like, wait a minute, is he supposed to be Scottish? Yes, his character is Scottish. His character is Scottish for, I would say, about 2.5 minutes. And then Richard Attenborough has just been like, I'm not going to do the Scottish shit anymore. And he's just English for the rest of the film.
It's that Clear and Present Danger, Sean Connery one, where he's again, was it Russian at the beginning, where they're speaking in Russian and stuff, and then all of a sudden he's just like, no, I'm just going to speak in my normal Scottish accent. We're fine. We're good. We're all right. We're going.
Sean Connery's the best because he's more committed to the idea of just like, I don't give a fuck if I'm a Spanish conquistador, I'm an alien from fucking Egypt or whatever the hell he was in Highlander and Highlander 2. He's just like, I'm just going to be, and he's not even Scottish. He's from Edinburgh. I've lived in Edinburgh. I've said this before. I've lived in Edinburgh for 18 years. Nobody sounds like Sean Connery except for Sean Connery. It's bizarre. And in every film, he's just like, fuck it, I'm just going to be Sean Connery. That takes that's some movie star shit. The kind of movie star shit you just don't get anymore, where an actor's just like, nah, fuck that. I'm just gonna be me, and everyone else has to just kind of fall in line accordingly because you're the big shit on set. It's fucking awesome. I love it.
Do you know you said as well? Security didn't stop Athena because she had the mask on.
Yeah,
there's a reason for that, wasn't there? Because it looked like they borrowed the security from Spaceballs.
They really did. They really did. There is a hint of space, but like this film has horrendous set design throughout and very questionable technology. It does tiptoe towards parody. You mentioned Achilles' flying car, and the flying car actually looks kind of cool. It looks a little bit like the what's it called, the Cybertruck. But then, how does he control it? Oh, a remote control that looks like an 80s portable radio. Why does it look like an 80s portable radio, Liam? Oh, that's because it fucking is an 80s portable radio. Every time there's a bit of technology, I'm not sure if you noticed, towards the end of the film, a lot of technology gets destroyed. A lot of people are pulling wires out of walls. They all explode. They all just explode. Every time somebody pulls a wire, a phone explodes for no fucking apparent reason. It's absolutely fantastic. Well, no, it's terrible, but it's also super fun, which kind of sums up this movie in many respects.
They are very easy as well to just pull these wires out, to get hold of anything that has wires. The way she opened his door lock, just by tapping it on the top, was able to open it and just pull a wire out, and that fucking sparked. That's fine, okay. Fantastic, and Jesus Christ, you need to check what resources your giant robots are fighting for, because I don't think you need. I guess you need to fight over. You need more wire or proper electricians or something. I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Something needs to go on. So we were talking about things which were underdeveloped in this film, and something just randomly popped into my head because I forgot to write it down. But I was just like, does this go anywhere? There is a point halfway through the film when Achilles makes a point of stating the fact that he can't read. And it goes nowhere. It goes fucking nowhere. It's never. I was just like, that's weird that they went out of their way to mention the fact that Achilles can't read. This will go somewhere, right? I can't remember it going somewhere, but this is like, I haven't seen this film for like 20, 25 years. It must have some kind of impact later in the film. Like you say, Chekhov's tractor legs. Yeah. It's like, surely Chekhov's I can't read is going to, kind of play its card later in the film.
You think what it would be on the, when he sends off the flying fist right at the end, like 2 buttons. Press this button to set it off, press this button to explode, and he has to read which one. You think that would have been what it was, wouldn't you? But no, not at all. Like, that's not.
It's such a shame. But the thing is, we are tearing this film to bits, and I was trying to remember why I loved this film so much as a kid, and why I still kind of enjoy it now. And a big part of it, despite the fact that it looks quite naff, as we've already said, with the set design and everything else, is the fact that the suits and the robots do look remarkably 80s awesome, and specifically 80s awesome. Like, I remember when I was younger, I really loved the jock suits in particular. And going back and rewatching now, and the reason is, I think because they all look like action figures. It's like, when you see him in the suit, it looks like a combination of Mask, Centurions, and like Mantiforce. All my like favorite toys from the 80s were combined to create this fucking awesome jock suit. And I was just like, it still looks badass.
What was the one where they had magnetic feet? Do you remember that toy?
Oh, dude, yeah. What the fuck was that called? Well, you look it up, and I'll just keep chatting for a second.
So hang on, before you do, because you're talking about the suit. While I'm looking it up, I just want to mention the suit.
Yeah, go for it.
What was your favorite part about? I think it was Athena's suit, because I can tell you what my favorite part was: the fact that she had audio-visual cables just put into her arm. The red, the blue, the black, the green, and the white. Yeah. It's just like audio-visual, just right in her arm.
It's just got this like charming, again, looks kind of chintzy, but also looks like it could have been created by like an 80s NASA thing. It's got that kind of retro futuristic vibe, but above all else, it just looks 80s. And what I really feel where I can really feel the inspiration coming from there is Starcom is like 80s anime in particular. It looks like it's jumped off the page of like a anime, manga, whatever you want to call it. and it still looks awesome to this day. And when you combine that with the robot jocks, and like I mentioned earlier, stuff like Mask, those are really popular in the 80s. It was like little figures you could put in bigger machines, was like all the craze for a while. I mentioned Mantiforce. Tiny little space dudes, but it meant that you could have this ginormous ship and you could fit like hundreds of characters in there. I loved all that shit. And of course, there's the massive influence from Transformers, which, again, one of the reasons this movie flopped is that Transformers wasn't really popular by the time 1990 came around. When this film was made, Transformers was popular, the Cold War was still going on. All of this made sense. By 1990, a few years later, it's just like, nobody's buying Transformers anymore. The Cold War's over. Nobody gives a fuck about robot jocks. I'm not sure if even if it released in 87 as planned, if it would have been a big hit, but it was, I think it had like a 10 million budget and ended up doing like 1.5 at the box office. So it was obviously a pretty big box office failure, but it obviously would have done better. Coming, they were planning on coming relatively hot off the heels of Rocky IV. And that must have been a big part of the reason this film even got funded. They were just like, oh, dude, imagine Rocky IV. So we have the Russian, we have the American, only like this giant robot as well, bro. And you're like, dude, just let me do one more line of coke and then I'll sign the check. Like, that's the kind of vibe they had, obviously.
And the problem is, I'm going to sign that check, but the check is enough for you to make the robots. But when it comes to the actors, I need you to get the guy from Alien Nation,
Gary Graham, who feels like a bit of an awesome... Like, he's got something about him. He's not bad in this film.
He's not good either, mind. Let's be fair.
No, he's not. There's a reason he wasn't maybe a megastar, but he's quite watchable in this film. I'm not so big on the actress who plays Athena. I forget her name now. Have you got it in front of
me? Marie Johnson.
She's actually gone on to have like a really impressive career. Like she's a comedian. I think she does impressions and stuff as well. But she's still working to this day, and she's obviously done pretty well. I think what they were going for, and you got to remember, this was like a thing in like the 80s and 90s in particular. Whenever they were kind of conveying a sense of the future, what it really meant was like gender non-specific. Now, of course, anything like that comes with big political outcry, and it has a lot more weight. Or unisex bathrooms. Again, nowadays it becomes a political conversation. Back then it was just like, oh look, this is what happens in the future. The other one that immediately jumps to mind is Starship Troopers. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and even I think what they were trying to do with the Tubies, I'm not sure if you noticed, they're all somewhat asexual and they all look quite similar. I think even that was potentially quite,
Athena and Sargon. I couldn't tell them apart. The only way you could tell them apart was Sargon had a rat's tail on the back of him, and then.
But I agree. But I was wondering if they did that on purpose. But again, like the whole developed thing. Like I like the idea that they're creating these Tubies, and because they've been created, they're all kind of asexual. They all look similar because they've been bred together. Like all that's again relatively interesting. This idea that you could almost tell a Tubie at a glance because you have different kind of races and genders and stuff like that. But when people look at them and go, oh, they look like Tubies, kind of thing. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, but it's another idea which just didn't go anywhere. But you can literally say that about every aspect of this film. Every idea that it has goes nowhere. The closest you get to any kind of progress beyond the whole Cold War thing is like the nature versus nurture, man versus machine. Like the whole idea that, regardless of what happens in the world, you can have these apocalyptic wars, we're still going to fundamentally be men with sticks and stones, which goes right through to that final shot with Alexander. I don't think it's by accident that the final shot isn't between two giant robots. It's between an American, a Russian, one has a stick, one has a rock, and they're still fighting. And it's like, I think it's a fundamentally solid idea and solid concept, but, it's followed by one of the cheesiest handshake. I'm not sure if you call it a handshake. The whole shake and bake thing at the end.
Crash and burn fist bump with the thumb up. It's just ridiculous.
It's kind of like Predator, only really fucking lame, basically.
Hey, you were saying about the Tubies as well.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it when Professor Laplace, I'm just going to call her Laplace, when she comes up and she asks for their fluids because she asks for Tex and for Achilles fluids because they're the Pinnacle. I appreciate Achilles is being sold as the Pinnacle. He can fight a load of Tubies, that's fine.
Yeah.
Would you want Tex's fluid?
I'm not sure anybody wants his Tex's fluid, but the thing is though, I'm just not convinced she's up to the task because one, I think we can all agree that the Gen Jocks program is an absolute fucking shit show. Yeah. And not only that, I can't shift the idea that she just looks like a dinner lady. She just looks like a dinner lady, especially at the end when they're having the big battle. They keep cutting to I can't remember the actor's name. The guy's like the guy in charge. So it keeps cutting back to those guys, and obviously to Achilles initially when Athena's like fighting in the giant jock.
Yeah.
It keeps cutting back to them, but it keeps cutting back to her in particular. And she doesn't know how to react. And she's got that blue bib, which if you're an American, this won't make any sense. But when I was growing up, all the dinner ladies had these kind of blue bibs, which looked exactly like what she was wearing. And she's constantly just shaking her arms, looking ridiculous. Like, why do we keep cutting back to her? She's hardly been a character for the whole film. And now I'm supposed to give a shit about this dinner lady shaking her arms up in the air? It's very strange.
It's giving a shit about any of them, though. That's the issue. Like Matsumoto dying. That did you recognize who Matsumoto was, by the way?
No.
So, played by an actor called Danny Kamakona, who was the bad guy from Karate Kid 2. He was Mr. Miyagi's.
Shit. Yeah. Great shout. He's actually okay.
I was expecting to say coward all the time, but obviously. But and the other one I wanted to ask you: did you recognize Reanimator himself?
Yeah, he's the guy in the crowd, wasn't he? And again, one of those scenes in the
weird Total Recall betting scene.
Or it could be Running Man. It could be any of these.
I meant Running Man. Not Total Recall, Running Man.
No. You could name any number of dystopian 80s films. If there's a dystopian movie set in the 80s, they always have like a weird betting scene. There's always a betting scene.
It's not just a dystopian movie. Any movie in the 80s, it was like Bloodsport. They're all and I've said this before. I've never understood this one. I kind of understood the betting because you go up to the machine, you put your card in, you tell it what you want, and it gives you the slip. How the guys know, it's like the fucking trading places thing again. How you know who's giving you the slip, I will never know. Like in these betting scenes, I will never know. Like
people are just throwing money at a dude on a stage. You're just like, how are they keeping track of this? This is insane. Absolutely mad. At least this one, it's one of the it's a strange scene because again, they haven't got the budget to show a huge crowd. So they have these two guys, but they really go out of the way to show, oh, look, this is how betting works in the future. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. The only crowd scene you get is actually the crowd scene from the first fight between Alexander and Achilles. And I mentioned earlier about the whole tone thing between the screenwriter and the director and like going back and forth. I want this to be a movie for adults. Sorry, adults, that sounds so much, that has different connotations. A movie for grown-ups which kids can watch and blah, blah, blah. For the most part, the director went out. This feels like a kid's movie, which adults can enjoy to one level or another, except for the scene with the crowd. One, how the fuck has that not happened before? The crowd are just there. There's giant robots fighting in front of them. Surely one of these, surely somebody's looked at it and gone, dude, I think this is an accident waiting to happen. This is
that's right. That's right. Going to
go south at some point. Exactly. Yeah.
That's what's the main job. Nothing could go wrong, can it? Can it?
Can it?
Something's going to go fucking. And when they said,
when it does, though, it's violent.
Yeah, and it's funny as well because then they said, it's okay. We've banned spectators. You should have done that from the start. Like, what the fuck are you doing? There's bullets flying around. There's lasers flying around, and there's fucking
giant 100-foot robots.
I loved it as well. They were selling these weapons. Oh, he's shooting you with a laser, but you've put your little mirror hand up. Now get him with the green laser, because the green laser will fuck him up. Oh, wait, he knows about the green laser because we have a spy. Like, what the fuck was the green laser meant to do over the red laser?
Again, the whole spy thing. So you've got the whole Matsumoto versus Tex thing. Surely Matsumoto would, I don't know, take this to somebody else rather than just interact with Tex directly on his own, knowing that there's a good chance he was going, and he wasn't even recording from the start. When he went south, he was like, I'm going to press this button, this giant remote in my pocket to record what's going on.
Is that remote in your pocket?
So Matsumoto deserved to die because his oversight was unforgivable as far as I'm concerned.
No, not because of his oversight. Sorry, not because of his oversight. Do you know why he deserved to die? Because he let Tex disarm him in the sloppiest way possible.
So sloppy.
Tex basically tripped over, tickled him, moved the gun. Like, what the fuck, mate? You should have shot him 3 times by that point.
I'm convinced Matsumoto wanted to die. And Matsumoto wasn't great at his job. So he's trying to figure out, all right, all of our weapons keep getting figured out because we have a spy. So he finally sorts out the spy problem. So suddenly he has this new weapon, which he doesn't tell anyone until Achilles is in his Robotrucks in the middle of a fight. So there is a button, which its special power is it's going to cause a blinding light It's the button with the sun on it. It's the button with the sun.
That's what I wanted to say.
What the fuck?
I wonder what this special. I wonder what the special weapon is. Could it be something to do with sun? Because you've just given me like the biggest red button I've ever seen. Like,
it's unbelievable. Hell. Like it felt like somebody made it out of felt tip and taped it on after. It was just like, dude, how are we going to make this more obvious? So I'll just kind of cut this out of paper and I'll just tape it on. It's outrageous. And also, in case you haven't noticed, it doesn't fucking work. So they made a big fuss of saying, okay, when you press this button, you're going to blind your opponents, or Alexander, for 90 seconds. It blinds Alexander for about half a second. I'd give him like 2 seconds max, and he's just straight back to the races. The weapon was shit and had zero impact. Similar to the drug that Athena used, which is supposed to, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, but what was it?
Incapacitate Achilles.
Incapacitate, thank you. Yeah. I couldn't get incapacitate out. So it's supposed to incapacitate him. She stabs him with it, and then he just gets up and fights anyway. It's absolutely useless. But Athena's a pleb. Like, she has this big argument in that sequence with Achilles, and she's like, oh, the only thing I can learn from you is how to lose. It's like, wait, you mean Achilles who's never lost? Like, that's his whole thing. The only thing we know about Achilles as a character, other than the fact that the motherfucker can't read for some reason, is that he never loses. He's never lost. And you're like, oh, all I can learn from you is how to lose. I was like, I don't know, I'm pretty sure you could only learn how to win from him, but whatever, man.
You know when he remote controlled his car to help him out of the room as well?
Yes, very, which was the James Bond film where, Pierce Brosnan had, was it the GoldenEye or was it Tomorrow Never Dies? I think it was Tomorrow Never Dies.
It was the one with Terry Hatcher where he's going up against.
Yeah, Tomorrow Never Dies, and he had it was like the BMW, and he had like what looked like an N-Gage phone.
Yeah,
like it just whenever I see somebody controlling a car like that, it always just reminds me of Tomorrow Never Dies.
But was he controlled? Did he manage to get that car into the building and into the hallways? Mm-hmm. Because it didn't crash from outside. Because he went through that.
Oh yeah. So it must have gone through like numerous layers.
Yeah, it got into a lift or it went up some stairs. Like that was some fucking good controlling, to be fair.
Yeah, and if you looked at the gizmo that he had that was controlling it, it had very rudimentary visual guides. It wasn't like there was a bit where there's the stairs. It was just like a line and a dot, and that was it. So
it's the Pac-Man map, basically.
It was basically just the Pac-Man map. But this is a world where they made strange decisions throughout. It's like, to bring it back to the Gen Jocks program. So they're just like, oh, we need to find the next generation of jocks. How are we going to determine who wins ostensibly this competition? Oh, we're going to have them fight on a climbing frame. We're just going to have a climbing frame challenge.
Not just any climbing frame, mind.
Do you not think we should put them in giant robots and have them compete each other? No. We've got the climbing frame thing. It's going to be pretty fucking awesome. A climbing frame. Yeah, but if some of it, like get this, when you get to the top and you think you're winning, it'll like squirt water at you, and then like another bit, like the bit falls away. It's pretty good. So wait, if the person's winning, they get punished because they're the first one there, and then if you're like third or fourth, you can just kind of avoid. Yeah, we didn't really think about that. Well, I mean, to be honest, this is a dumb idea anyway. We should be putting them in giant fucking robots. This is insane.
Like, if the winner ends up getting injured, you can't get the replacements. They're like the second guy who won because he fell off and broke half of his body because he's now in a full body cast. So
he's back in the bar the next day, regardless, of course.
Hey, before we move on, I realize we have to move on. I do have. What is Alexander's biggest dick move in this entire film? What's his biggest dick move?
Well, his biggest dick move is clearly the chainsaw dick move. I mean, that is like the biggest dick move of all time.
That is the biggest dick.
In the most literal sense, I suppose. Yeah.
Take the literal sense out of it. What is his biggest dick move?
I have no idea. Go for it.
It is letting Achilles get Athena. Oh, fucking too many E's in this film. Letting Achilles get Athena out of the Robo-Jocks, letting him then suit up, then get into it, then power it up, and just as he powers it up, he's letting he's let him do all of this, and he's like, oh yeah, we're gonna be like we're warriors, so we'll have a warrior's fight, a warrior's death. No. As soon as Achilles flips on the switch, he tries to step on him. If you were gonna do that in the first place, why did you let him fucking get ready?
It's very odd. Like, the idea is just like, oh well, as long as he's in the jocks, then it doesn't matter. Anything that happens after that is golden. So I can just step on him now. Yeah, well, Alexander's clearly out of his mind. You've heard his fucking accents. Nothing about him makes any sense. Although I quite like the back and forth. As I mentioned, it is quite homoerotic. but I quite like the interactions between Alexander and Achilles. I just wish there was more of it. But like I said, we've had this before on the podcast, this weird thing where I'm like, oh, I want more of this, I want more of that. But at the same time, I also want this movie to remain 80, 85 minutes. I'm just not convinced by adding 20 minutes of plot or character development is really going to fundamentally make this movie any better. The reason it's fun, the reason it's genuinely watchable at all in 2025 in particular, is the fact that it's almost over before you know it. It's like, oh, this is fun, this is silly. It's like that's the great thing about these films, is that even if they're kind of bad, because it is in the territory of kind of almost so bad it's good, you can just sit there and enjoy it because it flies by. That's the one thing I'll say about it. It's like, yeah, if you stop and think about it, none of it really makes sense. All the themes are underbaked, blah, 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 blah. But in reality, when you're watching it, it's over before you know it. And you're like, oh man, those robots are kind of cool. Well, and we haven't even mentioned the fact that like that whole stop motion thing, it gives the movie a certain charm which is completely absent from early CG, for instance.
Yeah.
If this was made in like 1994 and they went for like a low budget CG version of this, it would look terrible. This still does kind of look terrible in stop motion, but there is a charm to it. Although bizarrely, when I see giant robots in stop motion, do you know the movie that immediately pops to mind? It's RoboCop 2 specifically.
Yeah. With the fucking guy who's selling the nuke when he's in his robot body at the end of the film. Yeah.
I know there's like one sequence with Ed 209. I think it's the bit on the stairs, which is done with stop motion and it falls down the stairs and stuff. But I think it's more prevalent in RoboCop 2. And whenever I think of giant robots and stop motion, I always think of that. But yeah, as I said, the big issue with this film fundamentally is the fact that tonally it doesn't pick a lane. And, I know it's got a bigger budget, it's a better movie, but that's something that Pacific Rim did. That did go for the whole, let's make a kid's film that adults can enjoy. That's what Pacific Rim is, and it's all the better for it. But anyway, should we move on to our favorite scene?
Yeah, feel free.
The answer is, despite the fact that it's dumb as shit, it's the final showdown with Alexander. I mean, I know there's the low-key stakes of fighting over Alaska, but it is super fun. Yeah, them going to space make any sense? No, but it's cool. Does him turning into wheelchair robot trucks make any sense? No, it's just because there are treads on the back, but it is kind of cool. The dick saw is ridiculous, but again, it's a, no pun intended, it's a pretty ballsy move. So it's the final showdown.
I was going to go final showdown as well. I mean, I did like the fact that this is one of the only films that gets space right. You don't hear anything in space when they're shooting their guns or anything. There's just no sound. But I've got to go because I'm trying to put emotion into this film. I've got to go when he kills 300 people in the stands because you get the emotion of it. Then that's terrible. And I've done my 10 fights. I'm not doing any more for you. I've done my contracted 10 fights. 7.5 hours later, he's like, no, I'm back. It's fine. And I don't know why I'm saying 7.5, but it feels like it was.
No, but it feels something like that. And as you say, it's one of the few moments in the film where I feel like the screenwriter kind of won out to a certain extent and tried to add some depth and some threat to this movie. And, even watching it on a visual level, it is quite disturbing when the robot falls on the crowd. And you see that there's one dude in particular kind of runs past the camera screaming. His face looks like it's like half melted off. You're like, God damn, this is fucked up. Yeah. And it does add some stakes to a movie that is largely lacking stakes for the rest of it. But it's a shame that doesn't really go anywhere. But it's a hint at the movie that this could have been, I think.
Oh, that's the thing with all of this. When nothing really goes anyway, but they go somewhere kind of thing. It's very odd.
You can imagine there would be, and I think there was a novelization, which was actually released before the movie because the whole timing thing, the fact that this was filmed in 77, supposed to be out in 88. So there was a novelization before. I've obviously, unsurprisingly, never read it. But I wonder if it goes a little bit deeper into this. Like there is a world where, you could really, there's a lot to work with if you ever did like a sequel or dare I say a remake, but we'll get to that in a bit. In terms of loves and hates, love number one for me is unquestionably the design of the mechs and the suits. Absolutely fantastic and still look great today. Two, fundamentally a great premise. What if we crossed Rocky IV with Transformers? On paper, this is a great idea, and you can see why it got made. It just doesn't quite land the plane. Number three, the stop motion visuals, while dated, have a charm, as I mentioned earlier, that like early CG doesn't have. And number four, I'm going to sneak one in. The score by Frederick Talgorn is surprisingly brilliant. It was actually performed by the Paris Philharmonic Orchestra, and you can really hear it. Like it's so much better than the movie. It's outrageous. So those are my loves.
I had trouble finding loves, if I'm gonna be honest with you. Yeah,
Ouch.
I know. So, but I'm with you. The look of the Robo Jocks, the look of the mechs,
Mhm.
especially when the mechs aren't moving. Like when you get that visual shot of looking up at the mech
Mhm.
before it as it raises out of the ground
Yeah.
into no man's land or dead man's territory or wherever it was. Uh, I think it looked great.
Mhm.
What was the other one
It was
I had?
good sense of scale as well. I
Yeah.
think in this film, like they do genuinely feel like giant robots. I think.
Again, I'm stretching here. Whole space battle because there's no sound.
Mhm.
I love that because it was proper. That's what happens in space. So
Yeah, you are stretching now. You
yeah,
obviously
yeah.
weren't a massive fan of this film revisiting it, in fairness.
No, no. I mean, I loved this film as a kid, and yeah, I've had
Well,
a bit
that's
of an
part of the
issue
point of
going
this
back to it.
podcast. There's a
Yeah,
reason neither of us had gone back to this film for over 20 years. I think because we both
couldn't find it.
realistically knew. And bizarrely, my brother sent me this post on Facebook. I had sent him because this Robotjocks must have popped up on Netflix 6 years ago. So 6 years ago to the day that I rewatched this for the podcast, I said, "Oh, Robotjocks is on Netflix," but I'm terrified of rewatching it because I think it might be shit. So like 6 years ago when that popped up, I was just like, I'm not going to rewatch Robotjocks. I'm going to leave my precious memories in the past. I'm going to leave. I don't want have to put on my rose tinted glasses, any of that nonsense. And of course, when I do it for the podcast, you have to go back and deal with the past, deal with the reality that Robojocks was not a good film in 1990, and it's definitely not a good film in 2025, sadly.
Last one as well for my loves. It's Dipsaw. I
Oh yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
yeah. I mean,
It's
but
such
really
like
good though. Like you got
outrageous.
about the stop motion when basically his like hips opened, his pelvis opened, and then he
Mm-hmm.
just got a sore erection, as it were. No
Yeah,
pun
yeah, it's
intended.
exactly what it is.
And it even gave him like a little ball bag at the bottom as well.
I didn't notice the testicles, but the dick saw was more than enough, dare I say. I don't think
Yeah.
it wasn't subtle by any stretch of the imagination. In terms of hates, number one, the themes and characters are massively underdeveloped, which is a shame because, as I said, it hints at a wider world which you never get to really visit. Number two, Alexander and his ridiculous Russian accent. That could just as easily be in Loves, though. It's bad. It's so bad that I do kind of enjoy his Russian accent. I'm like, would this film be any better if his Russian accent was good? I was like, no, I think I'll keep it shit. Number three, the Gen Jocks program is ass, and again, thematically underdeveloped. I was thinking a fourth one again doesn't commit to the director's or the screenwriter's intended tone and ends up something of a no man's land. It's not. You get a bit of this, a bit of that, and you end up with a movie that feels somewhat messy, sadly.
So I had to only pick three, so it took me a minute. Number one, I wasn't buying any of these people being peak warriors. Like I just couldn't buy it. Like they're meant to be, and look, that's coming from me. I'm shaped like Play-Doh, but it's just I wasn't buying them being peak warriors. And all right, eighties martial arts kind of thing is not what you see this day and age. But seeing him take on a room full of people where he could barely get his leg over his hip just didn't do it for me.
It's a
Uh,
shame because again, I think there was an interesting idea there. Like, I mentioned earlier, like there's a hint of Gattaca about this. That you have all these like perfectly formed humans,
yeah,
but there's something about the human spirit which doesn't show up on a graph. So if he'd had those fights, it's almost like they're more skillful, but he just had more grit and determination. I think you could have even without kind of like being overbearing, with the points or anything. They could have just had him like getting beaten up, but then like fighting back despite the fact that he was like overmatched or something along those lines. But it just never happened, sadly. So you end up with just a guy who looks 48 years old. I know he wasn't at the time, but he kind of has that vibe.
yeah.
His kicks aren't particularly impressive, and you're like, I'm just supposed to believe that he's just kicking the ass of like a group of genetically created 25-year-olds. It's just like, not sure about that.
Number two, yes, I'm only on number two. As much
That's
as you
my
said,
fault.
as much as you said, don't go after him. Michael Aldridge's Tex, he's fucking awful, dude. He's
he's
terrible.
he is the character version of Alexander's accent, basically, where he is kind of terrible, but he's also kind of fun, dare I say.
And number three, yes, Alexander's accent. Like
Yeah.
he's like tripping over his false teeth as he's trying to sound Russian.
I'm not even sure if he gets close. As I said, I do think if this film had been a bigger hit, I think it would be in the pantheons, alongside John Malkovich, Schwarzenegger, Clint Eastwood, etc., as worst Russian accents. But I just don't think many people are watching or talking about Robot Jock, sadly. Although maybe we'll be surprised when this podcast goes back and everyone will be like, what the fuck, guys? I fucking love Robot Jocks. It's like, settle down, by the way. If you love Robot Jocks, go back, revisit it. It's fun. It's not brilliant. It's not an objectively good film. You can just forget about that.
I'm glad I watched it. I'm really glad I watched it. Me too. But oh my god, it's not a good film. Yeah.
No. Any alternative titles other than the aforementioned RoboJocks?
Yeah, to be fair, more than I thought there was going to be. So we've only got 6, but yeah. Mm-hmm. So Mexico, Challenge in Death Valley.
Rubbish.
Yeah. Brazil, RoboJocks, Gladiators of the Future.
That's okay. I still prefer Robot Jocks, but it's fine.
France, Gladiators of the Apocalypse.
No, it's got to have something to do with robots. That's the whole selling point in this film. The robots have to be in it.
Germany, Robot Jocks, The Battle of the Steel Giants.
Yeah, sure.
Poland. Yeah, Poland. Jocks the Robot, Merciless Killers.
That's a weird one because it sounds like a combination of a kid show and an R-rated action movie.
Yeah, so. It's a little robot, isn't it? It sits on his own name, Jock.
Yeah, but then the second part sounds really violent, so it just confuses the shit out of me.
Serbia, I'm not sure what they watched, but it wasn't this. Human Robots.
Yeah, no, it's not this. That's more like Cyborg, isn't it? Very strange.
That's it. I literally only had 6.
Oh, fair enough. Any facts to this film? I can't imagine there's tons.
No, there's not many. The screams of the spectators being crushed by the giant robot were later sampled into the song The Becoming by Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? Yeah, I read that as well. So Nine Inch Nails apparently love this film.
An actual sequel to Robot Jocks was considered but never made. Stuart Gordon, Gary Graham, and Paul Koslow would have returned as both director and stars, respectively. The cancelled sequel would have had Achilles and Alexander team up to stop an alien invasion. Now, the reason why I think it says an actual sequel is because there's 2. The UK definitely had one of them. I think it was called Robot Jocks 2 Crash and Burn. And it was just a film. It was just a film called Crash and Burn at the time in America about a random big robot. But it was like some guys in a news station in the middle of nowhere, and the robot is used once. I think you remember that film.
I do remember that film. I randomly watched that when I was younger, and I remember thinking, "Wait, has this got anything to do with Robot Jocks?" It's really, really strange.
Yeah,
it's the closest we've got in the UK. Like when we've gone back and we've done We've basically had this section, and then in Germany, it's like Bloodsport is called like Bloodsport 5, and you're like, how the fuck is it Bloodsport 5? And they've just kind of bolted it onto another series. That's kind of the closest we've got to it with Robot Jocks 2, where you're just like, what the fuck is going on? Or the video game equivalent would be like Super Mario Brothers 2. Like in America, in Japan, Super Mario Brothers 2 is very similar to Super Mario Brothers 1, but it was deemed too difficult for Western audiences. So they took a pre-existing game and just Mario'd it the fuck up. And that became Super Mario Brothers 2. And that's kind of what it feels like they did with Robot Jocks, where they're just like, we can call this Robot Jocks. No one's going to give a fuck, are they? And that's why it ends up with Crash and Burn.
Stuart Gordon almost cast Jean-Claude Van Damme in the lead role of Achilles. I mean, you're getting bigger kicks then, aren't you?
Well, you're just getting a better movie. You're just getting a better movie. He's not a better actor, but you're getting a better movie. And certainly, if you took everything about this film in watching this when I was like 9-10 years old, and then you just add Jean-Claude Van Damme to it, I like it twice as much, automatically. Twice as much.
I don't know what the person who wrote this one was watching. Contrary to what was seen on screen, stars Gary Graham and Anne-Marie Johnson did not get along with one another. They didn't get along with one another on the screen because they met twice and then apparently were in love. But okay, whatever.
Sure.
Mostly because of their differences in political beliefs. Graham was mostly conservative, while Johnson had a more liberal mindset. I mean, if you're going to let politics get in your way when you're working, that's on you.
That's on them. I mean, like you said, their chemistry isn't actually terrible on screen. There's just nothing to really work with from a script perspective. There's just not enough. There's just they don't like each other. Oh, I get it. We've seen it in a billion films. They clash, but then they're like, oh, but I kind of love you. There's just not enough screen time for them, so you just don't really care. But their actual chemistry is it's hardly red hot, but it's fine. It's whatever.
And this is why you're pulling the bottom of the barrel for these facts. One of the symbols on the jumpsuits looks like Spider-Man's mask.
Oh, there we go. And didn't this film put under the production company? I think it was called like Empire Movies or something like that. And they obviously, this was like their big swing. They had never provided a budget anywhere near this big. And, it sounds very small by today's standards, but 10 million was a pretty big deal for them, obviously. Yeah. And then they ended up going under. And that was actually one of the reasons that this movie was released so late, was because the original production company went out of business and then they had to find new distributors. And that's why it got pushed out to 1990 and then thus bombed, because none of the themes made any sense anymore or weren't in the public consciousness in the same way as they were in 97, 98. Yeah. In terms of Hug to the Future, so it's where we ask a question, remake, sequel, Let It Die or Leave Well Alone. This is perfect for a remake. So I know we've already had, what's it called? A Pacific Rim, which is very similar to this in many respects. But I would love to have, Rocky IV, Russians versus Americans, especially with the Russians at the moment, like get that back on the screen again. I would love to get Joseph Kosinski on the case. I know you're not a fan, but like Cruz is Achilles. One more fight for I was going to say the big man for the little man versus the Russians. I'd have the Russian played by Viggo Mortensen. I'm just like, he would be fucking awesome. Joseph Kosinski, he would absolutely nail, if nothing else, he would nail the aesthetic. So I would I was half joking about the Cruz thing, although, obviously Cruz has a relationship with Joseph Kosinski, so it's not out of the question. And I actually think he'd be perfectly good in the movie. But I would love to get a director like him, a real visual director, nail the max, give him a bigger budget, and still do the whole America versus Russia thing. I think there's a good idea here. It just wasn't brilliantly realized in the case of Brokeback, sadly.
I do think it needs a sequel and a remake as well. I absolutely agree, and it's going to surprise you. I quite like the idea of James Cameron doing something like this. I think visually it'd be really good, and maybe
he loves Max. Yeah, and he loves Japanese anime.
That's the thing, and maybe bring us back to his roots a little bit within the 80s films. But
that'd be a great shot. I would love nothing more. That's actually the perfect shot. Like if you could get James Cameron and you just said, listen, here's and not even like a mega budget. See what James Cameron could do with like 50 million. I bet you we can make this film look fucking amazing. Yeah. What's the name? Is it Gareth Edwards who did what was it? What the fuck?
Godzilla.
Yeah, but he recently did the film with Denzel Washington's son. Like The Pacifier. It's not The Pacifier. It's something
Denzel
like
Washington's son.
You know Denzel Washington's son, right?
No?
Yeah, for fuck's sake.
Is he an actor?
Yeah. He was in Tenet.
That's Denzel Washington's son?
Yeah. I know he's not.
Oh, okay.
What's his name? Oh, my God. John David Washington. There we go. But no, there was a sci-fi film he was in. The Creator. That was it. Jesus Christ. That film, it was a shame because it was a bit of a flop. But that film
Hang on, go back. That dude is fucking Denzel Washington's son.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. He's really good. And The Creator was directed by Gareth Edwards. And he made that on a relatively limited budget. And it looks phenomenal. And I was just like, dude, give James Cameron or Gareth Edwards, someone like that, give him like 50, 60 million. Don't put that massive amount of pressure on it. You don't even need like a massive star. Just say, make a Robot Jox remake. That would be so fucking cool. Where there's no pressure for it to make 100 million. Just make it for 50, 60. You can go crazy with the tone. You can go big on the violence. And all it has to do is make like 150 and you've got a hit on your hands. That would be perfect.
Oh, he can go back to his roots as well because he was a model builder. He did a lot of the models for Aliens and things like that. So I'm in that.
I'm all in on the James Cameron thing now.
I've never disliked James. I've disliked James Cameron's later stuff, but his 80s fucking fare, I've always loved.
Well, I know we have different opinions, obviously, on Avatar, and I know Avatar's not the best one, but I do think they're technical marvels. But as a palate cleanser, after the scale and the madness of Avatar, it's like, go back, make a film, make it in a few months, 50, 60 million. James Cameron, if you listen to this, you're probably not, but make Robot Jox, man. That would be so cool. That would be so cool. But anyway, so that's...
I'm still reeling. If I take anything back from this, the dude from Tenet is fucking... Denzel Washington's son. How the fuck did I miss that?
John David Washington's he's such a good actor. He's good in everything I've seen him in.
Fucking Black Klansman. He's fucking great in it.
He's awesome in that. No, he's also he's great in The Creator. The Creator just doesn't quite it was never quite the film I wanted it to be.
No, it never. Yeah, I tried it. And it wasn't.
I liked it. It's like a 3-star movie. Like surprisingly forgetful, but it looks amazing. That's the important thing. In terms of making a change, so this is the section where we say if you could only change one thing to make this film better, it's tricky for me because I would say more depth to the themes and the characters, but like I said earlier, I like that 85-minute runtime. So I'll say commit to the screenwriter's intended tone. That would be my preference for this film.
If I'm making a change, I don't need this weird love thing between Athena and Achilles. It just didn't seem to go anywhere. To have him come back for that, and then and that weird kiss at the end as well. And I don't think we need the Tubies, to be fair. I don't think we need those characters.
Again, yeah, I get why they're in there, but they just don't do enough with it. So again, it just feels like another thing, which is like a narrative strand, which is just left dangling at the end of the film. And we're not doing anything with this. No, with this, there's so many narrative strands which go fucking nowhere in this film. It's such a shame. In terms of video games, criminally, there wasn't a Robot Jox video game. I would love to say Titanfall 2 or Armored Core, but
literally what I wrote down.
The mechs are much quicker. So I will go for the slower paced mech battles of the Mech Warrior season by Piranha Games as my grown-up answer. The actual answer is I just want Respawn and EA to make Titanfall 3. I mean, Titanfall 2 is so fucking
good.
Not only is the multiplayer amazing, and it's relatively short. Like the campaign's like 5-6 hours. It is one of the best, and this is an exaggeration. I would say it's one of the top 5 first-person campaigns of all time. Like it belongs in the same category as shit like Halo 1 and Half-Life 2. It's that fucking good. And you know the reason they're not making it is because they made Apex, which belongs in the same universe supposedly, and it's just a cash cow. Go fuck yourself, EA. Why can't you just make fucking video games anymore? It just drives me up the wall. Titanfall 3 was just and the problem was they fucked themselves with Titanfall 2. I'm not sure if you remember. Titanfall 2, killer reviews, amazing gameplay, all this shit, but they released it in a week between Call of Duty and Battlefield. The worst thing about that is they fucking own Battlefield as well. They just put it out to die. And you're just like, oh, guys, you suck ass. Titanfall 2 is so good. And I would love Robot Jox, but done in the style of Titanfall. It'd be amazing.
And that's the right answer. I had that as well. Titanfall 2. It came out of nowhere. I absolutely adore it. I've played it like a number of times. It's so good. And like you said, it's such a short campaign, but it's so moving as well. I love it. And the thing is, if I go back to making a change, maybe taking it from Titanfall 2, you give the robot an AI.
Oh, that's a good shout. Yeah, good shout.
You give it an AI, and then you don't need the fucking Athena and all that shit. Then you just have the relationship between the robot and the Titanfall on film form. So,
and even it's not just the gameplay. Like the tone of that is the tone that this film probably should have had. Like if you're going for the director's approach specifically, because I mentioned the screenwriter's approach, so more the movie for adults, which kids can enjoy. If you're going for the director's approach of a kids movie which adults can enjoy, that is Titanfall 2. It's got a kind of certain Saturday morning cartoon vibe, but also kind of grounds it in a bit of reality. Absolutely fantastic. So yeah, Titanfall 3, Robot Jox. That's what we both want, basically.
Yeah.
That leads us into best and worst of IMDb. Now, this is going to be interesting because I firstly, how many reviews are there going to be for Robot Jox? I'm going to guess 67.
83.
83. Now, this is the trickiest bit, I think, is how many 1-star and 10-star reviews. I suspect there will be more 10-star reviews because I think a lot of people who have watched this have very fond memories of it like we did.
Okay.
So I'm going to say like 12 10-star reviews.
Okay. 10.
Oh, it's close again. I'm going to say like
Don't 4. Say the 1 yet. Don't say the 1.
Okay,
let me give you the 10-star.
All right, go for it.
Okay, so again, written on November 2001. The title being "What's Up with the Bad Reviews." This film seems to get bad criticism for some reason, probably just by the mass populace. Anyhow, this is actually a very interesting movie. The film is an under-budget sci-fi movie which actually works due to an interesting storyline and well-done scenes. This movie may not be for everyone, though. If there are any sci-fi fans reading this, I truly recommend this movie if you like a good old science fiction. The film has crazy ideas. The setting includes nations going to war with gigantic machines, which the entire countries invest all its money in. The world has been divided up into territories. Anyone can challenge anyone else to a war, or rather a robot duel. The method of warfare is cleaner than nuclear war, since now everyone is wearing those breathing masks. Definitely a movie that makes you think. Intelligent, well-written, and good effects for the measly budget. I tend to like movies which have small budgets and actually work.
Fair enough. I mean, I don't disagree with all that. It's just, it's more clunky than he's letting on.
That's like better than last week's 10-star review, which basically just told you the plot again.
Yeah, that was quite good, actually. Yeah. But no, I mean, this film does have good ideas. It just doesn't go anywhere with them, sadly. Yeah. So, but it is what it is. All right, so 1-star reviews. I don't think there's that many. I reckon there's going to be like 4 or 5.
3.
Oh, close.
You're getting it again.
Getting close with this.
Okay, so written on October 2009. How do you spell crap? ROBOTJOX.
Oh my
Burn the Master. Grotesquely horrible. No ending, no closure. Completely and utterly the worst movie ever made. Replaces The Adventure of Pluto Nash as the worst movie of all time.
No. Do not evoke Pluto Nash when we're talking about RoboJox. RoboJox has problems. RoboJox is not Pluto Nash. Bizarrely, Pluto Nash, that is the second time that movie has come up today for me. I was just reading earlier, I was just talking, it was movies from like 2002, and Pluto Nash randomly fucking came up. That film is ass.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's so bad.
I hate this utterly unacted, unedited, unscripted, undirected, unproduced mess of a thing called RoboJox. And I just found out they made a second one. I apologize to Adam Sandler, Zohar, the beautician, and Eddie Murphy, Pluto Nash, for hating their movies.
No. Again, I'm sorry. Zohan is surprisingly good. I've got it's not brilliant, but I've got a genuine soft spot for Don't Mess with the Zohan. Don't Mess with the Zohan is so much better than fucking Pluto Nash. So I'm disagreeing with everything this dude says.
It's not Don't Mess with the Zohan. It's Zohar the beautician.
No, Zohan he's a hair guy. Yeah, he's just making up a film. There's no film with Adam Sandler called Zohar the Beautician. He must mean Don't Mess with the Zohan.
Yeah, he's got it. Yeah, that's right.
Because he's a hairdresser. Yeah, no, this guy can go fuck himself.
This mess of a thing makes those movies only bad, not terrible, horrible, and grotesque like this thing. This is the only movie for which I have ever said this. Remove it from Netflix now. 10,000 out of 10 people found this comment helpful. He wrote that himself. Usually at the end, it's really 1 out of 6 people found this helpful, but he's got 10,000 out of 10 people found this helpful.
Well, this lunatic is clearly out of his mind. Although, if somebody said to me, like, in a level-headed way, said, I think this is a 1-star movie, I'm like, I get it. It's got it's closer to being a 1-star movie than it is a 10-star movie. Put it that way. This film objectively has problems. If somebody hated it, I get it. I don't agree with the way that gentleman went about his business. Put it that way. But yeah, 1 star isn't unquestionable. Which brings us to our own ratings.
Sorry, before you do it, this guy is a troll. He's only reviewing technically bad films. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, When in Rome, G.I. Joe, Rise of the Cobra. Like 7 pounds with Will Smith, Beowulf. Like he's only reviewing shit films.
No, see, I actually quite like Beowulf as well. Beowulf and Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls don't belong on that list as far as I'm concerned. They're perfectly decent films.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you're interested in my views on Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which are somewhat forgiving, especially the first half, we have done a podcast on that. Shameless plug at the end of this podcast, obviously. But yeah, our own ratings and recommendations. Now, I have gone back and forth on this, not in terms of the recommendation. I wouldn't recommend this to anyone at all. It's unthinkable in 2025 to go out my way to recommend RoboJox. If you don't have any nostalgia for it, do not watch this film. If you do have nostalgia for it, also don't watch this film. Leave it in the past. I loathe to give this rating because I don't like to give halves, but I couldn't decide between 2 and 3, so I've gone for 2.5 because I still enjoy this film. Despite all, we have been very critical of this film, and it is easy to tear this film to pieces. But there is something about the aesthetic, the fact that it's, without the credits and everything, it's basically 18 minutes long. It absolutely zips by. I still enjoyed watching this film, despite the fact that it is, again, to use that word, objectively quite bad. But there is no escaping the fact that, yes, it is indeed quite bad for the myriad we've given over the last hour or so of this podcast. So I'm going to go with 2.5. I think that's the only answer that I would feel, positive about.
kind of agree with you on record. I wouldn't recommend it. Again, if you remember it, don't watch it. If you've never watched it, don't watch it. The only way I would recommend watching this is if you're doing it for a podcast.
And exactly.
Like that's the only way you should watch this film. It was a 1 star for 80 odd minutes of this film, and then the dick saw pushed her up to a 2. As soon as the dick saw came out, I'm like, well, that gives it a star all of its own. Like,
see, I'm going to do a bit of. I feel like you've convinced me this time. I'm gonna take it down to a 2. I was in an hour in the whole 2 and 3. That the 3 was nostalgia talking. The reality is this. I wouldn't give it 1 star because, as I said, I do like the aesthetic. I'm a bit warmer on some of the actors and the performances than you are. I do like the fact that there are good ideas, somewhat pushed to the background, but they are there. It's not devoid of, ambition. It's just kind of, muted, should we say. So I am going to go with 2 stars. It is fun, but it is massively, massively flawed. And that is the big problem, like you said, in terms of recommendations. Like who should, and we should be trying to recommend this because we want people to watch it and then listen to the podcast, obviously. But the fact is, if you do have fond memories, you're really taking those memories at risk. You're putting those memories at risk because revisiting it now, it's not a great movie, sadly.
I think we're good because the people who are listening to us have probably watched it already.
Yeah, I think we're okay. I think we are fine. But the point is, like we said at the top of the podcast, even though we loved this movie as a kid, I think we both had that reality. Like we knew it wasn't brilliant. Like I said, there were some films I watched as a kid. I was like, I love this film, and I also know on some kind of fundamental level that this is a brilliant film.
Yeah, whereas like King of the Kickboxers, absolutely brilliant film, fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas something like this, I think I knew it was silly, but there was nothing like it. There were no Transformers movies back then.
No.
So this was the closest thing we had to it. And of course, like when this came out, or I say I was watching this film realistically in like 1991, so I would have been like 9 years old. I was just getting into like anime. Like I'd just been introduced to stuff like Akira and Fist of the North Star. And, suddenly you see all these like mangas and animes with these giant robots. And the closest thing we had to it in terms of something live action on screen was this. So I think I was able to just push all the issues that I had with this film to one side and just go, wow, aesthetically, this film is fucking awesome. And it still is kind of awesome. But as a movie, it kind of stinks, sadly. So yeah. 2 stars from both of us. So that has been 1990s on 1987s, whatever the fuck it was actually made. Robot Jox. Now,
which, again, we've got to say, before we move on, that was episode 200. I've said it at the beginning, but how the fuck we made it to 200? That's a lot of films, dude. That is a lot of films. Sheer belligerence, as far as I'm concerned.
So the fact that we have gone to 200 episodes, we decided for the first 4 episodes of the 200s, that was a weird way of putting it, we're going to revisit some of our earliest podcasts. So we're not necessarily going to go for the first 4. We're going to pick one each, basically films that we did at the start where we didn't have the same categories, or basically, maybe the podcast just worked. Like if we go back and this is the earliest podcast, the audio isn't actually all that fantastic. So I thought now would be just an interesting time. Just to be clear, we're not going to like re-listen to those those movies. No. We're just going to watch them again and talk about them as if
we may repeat some of the things we've already said because again we might have the same views. I mean, it was 3 years later.
I might just be clear. I might contradict myself numerous times. Just be clear, I just don't give a shit. I'm gonna watch it in 2025. How do I feel about these movies in 2025? That's what you're gonna get, basically.
The only caveat we've given each other of the earlier films is we have to pick. We'll pick 2 each, obviously, and they have to come out of our first 10.
Yeah.
So out of our first 10 films that we covered, where we basically just started the premise of what we were doing, because we picked some bangers right at the beginning because we were excited. Yeah. So we want to go back now and pick some of them again. And now we've got, basically, we've pretty much nailed what we want to do, what we cover, our I don't want to call them subjects. What the fuck do we call them? Sections. Categories. Thank you. So it's your pick, obviously. So
this should be relatively easy. So the year is 1985. You haven't got that many to choose from, so
no. Basically, you're going episode 1, and you're going Goonies.
Yeah, I'm going Goonies. So it is. I am going for the Goonies. It was our very first episode. I just felt like if we're going to revisit any episodes, the movie that kind of gave name to this podcast with Hey Guys, like we have to do the Goonies. So it was low hanging fruit. But
I mean, if you weren't going to do it, I was going to do it. So
exactly, one of us is going to do it. I was willing to take the bullet. I say take the bullet. I love the Goonies, but I've not watched it since we did it 3 years ago now. So I'm looking forward to rewatching it. It's a movie that I love. I honestly can't remember the score we gave it. I mean, I've got to assume it was a 4 or a 5, but we'll find out how we feel about it next week. But
my son was 2. He's now 5 coming on 6. So I think it's the right time to see.
See, that's crazy, right? You've got like more of a kind of like visual guide to how much time has kind of moved on. I'm just like, oh, it was like 3 years ago. You think I was like a kid was like basically a baby, and now it's like he's like a little dude now. So yeah, absolutely.
But I'm wondering if I can sit him down now and get him to watch the Goonies and see how see what.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how he likes
adventure things and things like that. So I think I'm going to see if I can watch it with him.
I wonder what age I was the first time I watched the Goonies. So I know the first time I went to the cinema, and I mentioned this a few times, was in 1987. So I was 5 years old when I went to watch Masters of the Universe. And I had no issue sitting through that. I remember, I was more than sat right through the credits, right until Skeletor popped up, the full works. I must have seen Goonies before that. Obviously not in the cinema, because I would have been 3 years old when this came out. But I have to believe I watched Goonies when I was really young. So
for me, I think Goonies was probably early 90s, late 80s, probably when it first came onto TV. I don't think we would have rented it back then. I think it would have been TV for me.
Yeah, it would have been TV because we didn't get a VHS until I was like 8 or 9 years old, I don't think.
Yeah.
So it would have been on TV, but I just couldn't tell you the first time. I can't remember the first time I watched Goonies. It's just one of those films that, as far as my brain is concerned, I've just always known the Goonies. Yeah. But anyway, I think it's going to be like super interesting to go back to. I'd love to hear what your kid makes of it. That's going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's going to be fun revisiting. And like I said, we're only doing 4 of them, and then we'll go back to business as usual. But we thought now is as good a time as any to kind of revisit some of the classics from the first 10 episodes of Hey You Guys podcast. So yeah, the first one's Goonies. Can you watch it anywhere? I've not even checked.
Give me. Telling you to keep talking is like just, fucking telling somebody.
Yeah, I mean,
to keep drinking.
Yeah. If you just stop talking for a second, I'll just keep talking. And even if you do talk, I'll often just talk over the top of you. That's just what I do. But
for us, it's Netflix, ITVX. So
yeah, there we go. So ITVX and Netflix, Goonies is more than readily available.
Come on.
So if you fancy rewatching it before we record the podcast next week, that would be fucking awesome. So
I mean, you don't have it on DVD, VHS, streaming, and
no, I do have it on DVD and stuff. It's just nice for everyone else listening if they've got easy access to it ahead of the podcast. So yeah,
if you're listening to this fucking podcast, you have the Goonies somewhere. I'm sorry, you do
probably. Although that's made me think: is there a 4K release of the Goonies? I've not actually checked. I don't think I've seen it. I don't think there is, right?
No.
Because a lot of, like I've mentioned a few times, some of these 4K restorations are legitimately transformative. Like I remember like thinking with like Blu-ray, I was just like, dude, movies just aren't going to look any better than this. Some of the 4Ks look fucking amazing, especially older films, what they've done there. So the idea of like them bringing out a 4K, like, this is, before it was my excuse to maybe go out and buy a Blu-ray. Now I'm just like, we're doing like a movie I love for the podcast. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go out and buy the fucking,
There's a Goonies 4K Ultra HD.
Oh, that might be it then.
Yeah,
4K.
Released on August 30th, 2021. So,
no, yeah, the Goonies in the 4K,
Goonies 4K Blu-ray Steelbook.
Well, I might well buy that then. That might be my excuse.
You can get it on Amazon, so you have it tomorrow. You've got to pay 18 quid for it, but
tempting. But it is the Goonies. It is. It's one of those films. I'm not buying many 4K films, but there's like a handful. Like I said, I bought like Poltergeist. I bought The Thing. I bought Blade Runner. Like, I'm going to make my way through the top tier classics. I want to get Jaws, for instance, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, however you decide to watch it, there are plenty of ways to watch The Goonies. So please give it a go and do join us next week as we revisit 1985's The Goonies. Do you have anything else to add before we wrap this episode?
No, mate, I'll wrap that up now because I really need to visit the loo.
Oh, fair enough. Well, I've been Liam, he's been Rob, and you've been listening to the Hey Guys podcast. Cheers for listening, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Oh, and before I forget, where can folk reach us if they were so inclined to?
Well, you can actually reach us on Hey You Guys 80s at Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. But if you want to send us a mail, do heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Send us in your recommendations. Send us in your thoughts about any of the episodes. Just literally talk to us. We'll have a one-sided talk with you on the podcast.
Yeah. We're nice folk. Get in touch. But no, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Hey, you